Hi, welcome to Journey of Relaxation. Today we ride into the Mongol Empire, no not as warriors or conquerors, but as couriers. Yeah, you're the one stuck with the heavy leather satchel full of royal decrees wrapped scrolls, and a faint scent of camel sweat. Welcome to the Yam, Spartu Sarin, the high-speed postal system of the 13th century that somehow managed to make thousands of miles disappear under hoofbeats, windburn, and oddly hot baths. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. Midnight in Manila, dusk in Denmark, I always love seeing that. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You saddle up just as the first rays of dawn start to spill across the steppe, painting everything in golden dust. The air smells like grass, horsehair, and ambition. A thin plume of smoke curls from a distant gear, a Mongol tent, and your contact. A grizzled relay officer with no visible eyebrows gives you a nod so slight it might have been wind. No fanfare, just a satchel slapped against your chest and a terse word ride. You're astride a half-wild Mongolian pony. It's small, shaggy, and appears to hate your guts. But it's fast. Faster than anything with legs and lungs should be, honestly. Your thighs are already screaming, and you haven't even cleared the first hill. This is the Yam Genghis Khan's lightning strike communication system, sprawling like veins across his vast empire. And tonight, you're not just learning about it. You're living it. The first few miles are a blur of thundering hooves and flying grit. You pass a pair of goat herders who don't even look up. Like it's perfectly normal to see a dusty courier flying by with a half-tied sash and panic in their eyes. And it kind of is. By the 1220s, this system was already legendary. It stitched together a patchwork of languages, cultures, and conquests stretching from the Yellow Sea to the Black Sea. With over 1,400 relay stations spaced a day's ride apart, the Yam wasn't just a mail route, it was the connective tissue of an empire. But you're not thinking in terms of infrastructure. Right now, you're Mwakunanadas. You're thinking about the fact that this saddle has less padding than a medieval apology, and your canteen's already half empty. You pass your first checkpoint after about 3 hours. It's just a stone marker and a yawning teenager with a bow, but he squints at your seal, grunts approval, and waves you on. You don't stop, not yet. The air grows thinner as the elevation rises. Snow still clings to the mountain edges, but the spring thaw has turned the lower valleys to green mush. Your horse starts snorting at every rabbit hole, and you pray to every deity you've ever heard of not to snap a leg. You have no GPS, no map, just a mental list of relay stations and a vague sense of head west, but not too west, or you'll hit a gorge filled with skeletons. Historically speaking, this system was mind-blowingly advanced for its time. Riders had special passports called paisa, engraved with official authority. With it, they could demand food, shelter, fresh mounts, even backup security if things got spicy. It was like being a celebrity with a very bad job. But not every courier had one. You're still new. No paisa yet. You're freelancing your way up the ladder, which means you get the sketchiest horses and the most questionable leftovers. If someone hands you goat stew and it's moving, don't ask. Just chew. And let's be honest, the odds are stacked against you. Mongol couriers faced blizzards, ambushes, wolf packs, angry oxen, and bandit tribes that specialized in mail theft. Historians still argue whether the Yam's efficiency came more from its planning or from the rider's pure survival instinct. You clatter across a narrow bridge made of lashed birch trunks. Below, a river growls like it's got opinions. You tighten your grip and whisper calming things to the horse, like "don't you dare and I will turn you into jerky." Then as the sun crests high and your shirt sticks to your back like a wet rag, you see at your first or two a postal relay station. It's not much. A tent, a stable, a pole with a fluttering red cloth. But it smells like cooked millet and maybe a clean blanket. You dismount with legs made of wet noodles. And a woman with one eye and impeccable posture hands you a bowl of something bubbling. You drink before you ask. It's salty, sour, and sort of fermented mare's milk, probably. Classic Mongol electrolyte. The horses here snort and stamp, clearly healthier than the grumpy goblin you rode in on. You're told to pick one saddle up and keep going. But you linger a second. The woman is humming a song that sounds suspiciously like a lullaby. The station cat curls against your leg. And behind the tent, you glimpse what looks like no, it can't be a makeshift steam hut. A little spa shack in the middle of nowhere. You blink and it's gone hidden by smoke and shadows. Must have been the fatigue, or was it? You mount the next horse. It doesn't hate you yet. You ride on. Behind you, the first or two fades into the haze of dust and time. Ahead, the trail winds into hills that glow silver in the dying light. Already, you can feel your muscles hardening, your senses sharpening. You're part of the yam now. And this is only the beginning. You're galloping again this time, faster than before. Not because the terrain is any easier, if anything. It's lumpier, but because the horse you swapped for at the last station seems to have rocket fuel in its veins and a personal vendetta against standing still. The wind slashes your cheeks as you push westward the horizon, a blurred smear of grass dust and sky. Your eyes sting from the grit, but blinking feels like a luxury. At this speed, the world is a trembling drumbeat beneath your ribs. Yam riders don't really sleep. They doze, sometimes on horseback, occasionally while upright, leaning against a fence post. You start to understand why. The relay is relentless. Sleep is something you steal in 5-minute bursts between hoof swaps and hot broth. Your breath fogs as the temperature drops again, and you pull the leather scarf tighter over your mouth. It smells like the last rider. Smoky, earthy, faintly of onion. You pretend it's perfume. Genghis Khan didn't build the yam out of kindness. He built it because empires don't run on conquest alone. They need information fast. Orders from the Khan had to reach the farthest generals in days, not weeks. Tax quotas, military plans, marriage alliances, trade updates all traveled along this living highway of flesh and hoof and discipline. Some messages were so urgent, they were marked with special emblems. Riders carrying them had the authority to commandeer anything they needed: horses, food, beds, even local people as temporary guides. You look down at your satchel, no emblem today, just routine. Still, it beats hauling cabbage in a cart. You pass another courier coming from the opposite direction, his hair whipped flat against his skull. He flashes a tired grin. You nod back. No words, just mutual pain and pride. The yam stretched up to 10,000 miles across Asia at its height. That's 4 times the length of the Roman road system, and unlike cobblestones, this one could relocate overnight if needed. It's backbone riders like you relay stations, and horses that could run for hours through sandstorms, hail, or mosquito plagues. Some records say a message could cross 200 miles in a single day, absurd even by today's standards. Unless you're on a high-speed bullet train or texting your cousin in Uzbekistan. And this was centuries before the printing press. The Mongols didn't just outfight their enemies, they outcommunicated them. You reach another station by mid-afternoon. This one's busier. Several riders, 2 goats a pot boiling over with something mysterious and gray. A teenage boy waves you in. You swing down from your mount with the grace of a collapsing scarecrow. A grizzled old man inspects your satchel, nods, and points toward a nearby trough for your horse. Then he offers you a chunk of hard bread and something he calls meat. Though you'd bet your last toenail it once barked, you eat it anyway, because yam riders don't ask questions they don't want answers to. While your new horse is being prepared, you sit by a small fire and sip from a steaming bowl of broth. It's somehow both greasy and flavorless. You drink every drop. It feels like being hugged from the inside. Next to you, another rider's dozing with a knife still in hand. He snorts awake, mutters something about bandits with itchy arrows, and promptly drifts off again. You decide not to ask. Historians still argue whether the Mongol relay system was truly open to everyone in the empire or only an elite few. Some accounts describe peasants and foreign merchants using the route freely. Others suggest strict control with checkpoints monitoring every scroll and saddlebag. The truth probably shifts depending on the century and who was in charge. Your seal grants you passage, but it doesn't protect you from everything. Bandits still roam parts of the yam, especially in remote valleys. Wolves too. There's a story told around the fires of a rider who fell asleep near the Burkhan Khaldun mountains and woke up surrounded by blue-eyed wolves licking the frost from his saddle. He escaped. Barely, or so the tale goes. Back on the road, your next horse is a rangy gray with one ear missing and a twitchy back leg. You name him Optimism because you're starting to run out of actual optimism. You ride on blinking against the setting sun which drips gold across the hills. The shadows stretch long, your shoulders ache. You pass over a small ridge and there in a dip below is a cluster of gurs, some white. One painted blue and a flag fluttering from a pole. You don't expect much. Maybe some hot water, a slab of boiled millet, a mat to lie on. But as you approach, a strange scent wafts toward you. Rosemary, pine needles, and something mineral. That's when you hear it. A low bubbling like a stew pot, but deeper. You tie Optimism to a hitching post and wander behind the main tent. They're nestled in a crescent of stones as a pool of steaming water. Naturally heated, crystal clear, and empty except for one very relaxed-looking sheep half-submerged eyes closed in bliss. A hot spring. You blink again. A rider stumbles out of the main tent barefoot and wrapped in a damp robe. He waves at you lazily and mumbles, 10 minutes. Water's perfect. So that's how the yam keeps people alive, not just food and horses, but the occasional unexpected luxury. The Mongols believed in pragmatic comfort if it kept you alive and slightly happier. Why not include it? You slide into the water with a hiss and a groan. It smells like sulfur and moss. Feels like heaven. The stars begin to dot the sky above one by one. Somewhere nearby, someone starts playing a two-stringed meringue chor, a Mongolian horsehead fiddle. The music sounds like wind with feelings. You lean your head back, bones, floating muscles unclenching. The yam never stops, but for a moment you do. Steam still clings to your skin as you dry off with a cloth that's either goat hair or the roughest. Towel in Asia. Your fingers are pruny, your legs wobbly, and your soul just slightly more willing to continue living. You never thought a postal job would include mineral therapy, but here we are. A tall woman with a braid thick as a rope hands you a fresh bowl of broth. This one has mushrooms and is that scallion either way? You nod in thanks and down it like a reward. She points to the central juror where your next horse is waiting. You really should be off again. This is a relay station. Not a resort, but the firelight glows warm inside the tent, and someone inside just shouted, "We found more dumplings." You peek in. Half a dozen riders sit in a circle, wolfing down small dough parcels with greasy fingers and slumped postures. No one's talking. Just chewing, sighing, chewing again. You slide into the warmth, gratefully accept a dumpling, and join the silent feast. There's a rhythm to the yam ride, swap, eat, maybe sleep ride again. The stations or urtus form the vertebrae of the entire system, and each one is slightly different. Some are just tents in a windy field. Others fortified waypoints with fences, fire pits. And if you're lucky, a bathhouse made from yak skins and hot rocks. This one has everything: clean water, stew, warm shelter, and the most magnificent pickled turnips you've ever tasted. You'd compose a song about them if you weren't so exhausted. Instead, you wrap yourself in a spare blanket and lean against the wall. Just for a second, just to rest your eyes. You wake with a jolt 2 hours later. Horse breath on your face and a coarse bridle nudging your ribs. Someone's shoved your next mount into the tent to make a point. Fine, you get the message. Your next ride is a stocky mare with one blue eye and the personality of a tired librarian. She's steady, though. You settle into the rhythm, quickly clip clop, the endless soundscape of the steppe. The moon is high now, and frost kisses the grass. It's so quiet you can hear your own heartbeat sinking to the mare's stride. Historians still argue whether urtus were manned by state-appointed officials or locals who got stuck with the job. Some accounts say they were honored posts, civil servants respected and well-fed. Others suggest they were more like conscripted caretakers who cleaned up horse poop for a living and prayed for spring. You pass through 3 more relay stations before sunrise. Each one greets you with a horse swap, a ladle of something hot, and no questions. No one cares who you are, just that your seal is valid and your horse still has 4 working legs. At one stop, a young boy scrapes mud from your boots and hands you a boiled egg wrapped in bark. You offer him a carved bone button in return. He grins like he's won the imperial lottery. Some of these stations are surrounded by simple wooden fences. Others have stone markers or flags made of horsehair fluttering from spears. You realize that while the empire was vast and terrifying, these urtus are surprisingly human-scaled. They feel like a village in miniature, brief, purposeful, always ready for the next rider. And then there's the food. Hot broth is the yam's universal language. It greets you at every stop, always slightly different. Some broths are rich and gamey. Others thin and medicinal, sometimes with floating herbs. Sometimes with bits of mystery meat that stare back at you if you linger too long. You're not sure what animal the last one came from. Could have been a large bird. Could have been a lizard. You slurp it anyway. There's also fermented mare's milk, which is served warm and frothy and is absolutely not for beginners. It fizzes faintly and hits your stomach like a surprise math test, but it keeps you awake, alert, focused, also slightly suspicious of your own digestive system. And then there are the odd snacks, salted yak strips, freeze-dried curd chunks, crispy cricket flour, flatbread don't ask, and once even a dried pear soaked in vinegar. A station master told you it was good for riders' sadness. You don't argue, you eat the pear. At one station, a woman pats your arm, mutters something soothing in Mongolian, and slips a tiny cloth pouch into your hand. Inside are 3 pine nuts and a bit of dried sage, a talisman, she says, for safe passage, or maybe to keep wolves away. The translation is fuzzy, but the sentiment is warm. You're halfway through your leg of the route now. You've traveled over 300 miles in just a few days, impossibly fast for the 1200s. It would have taken a merchant caravan 3 weeks to cover that same ground-battling terrain. Taxes and the occasional surprise invasion. But you're not carrying silk or spices. You're carrying orders, secrets, promises. Sometimes you wonder what's in your satchel. You don't peek too risky, but you've heard rumors. Messages from the great Khan himself. Marriage contracts sealed in blood. One time a dispatch carried a single phrase, "He must die before the harvest." The writer didn't ask questions. Neither do you. Your next stop is built on a rise surrounded by stones etched with swirls and animal symbols. A sign that this place has been sacred long before Genghis Khan ever drew a bowstring. A man with a beard down to his belt inspects your satchel, nods and waves you toward a stable. He doesn't speak. You realize he might be mute, or just very committed to the strong silent aesthetic. A girl no older than 10 brings you your next horse. It's already saddled, tail braided with red thread. For luck. You mount up again. The horizon stretches out in all directions, like a taut canvas whispering promises. You feel the pull of the road ahead, the whisper of wind across your face. And just before you ride out, someone hands you another bowl. This one isn't broth. It's tea, real tea, hot, fragrant, and delicately sweet. You blink. A luxury. Someone likes you here. The tea is unexpected. It warms your hands and trickles down your throat like melted silk. You sip slowly, eyes closed, letting the rare sweetness soften the inside of your chest. For a moment, the road doesn't matter. Neither do your sore knees or your saddle-chafed thighs. You are just a person drinking tea in the dead middle of the Mongol Empire. And then you're back in the saddle, of course, because even with tea, the yam waits for no one. This stretch of the journey is flat or open. A sea of golden grass that sways in time with your horse's steady gait. There's no wind for once, which almost feels suspicious. The silence buzzes in your ears. Insects scatter before your hooves. The grass here grows so tall, it brushes your boots, as if trying to climb back onto the horse for a ride. You pass an old marker stone carved with strange loops and runes. Some writers say those stones were waypoints before the yam was formalized, that nomads used them to leave each other messages, scratches to mark where water flowed, or which passed to avoid if you liked having bones that stayed inside your body. Historians still argue whether these pre-yam markers influenced the station layout. Some believe Genghis repurposed ancient nomadic travel routes. Others claim he built the system from scratch with military precision, carving it into the land like a command. Either way, you get the sense you're moving through a landscape that's been talking to itself for centuries. And occasionally it talks to you. A lone eagle cries high overhead, spiraling on a thermal. You follow it with your gaze, almost losing sight of the road entirely. Your horse does not appreciate your sudden lack of leadership and veers into a patch of scrub, almost launching you headfirst into a suspiciously prickly bush. You right yourself with a grunt. No one saw that, except the eagle, who is definitely judging you. As evening falls, a new scent carries on the air. Wood smoke, damp moss, something vaguely cinnamony. You round a bend and find your next station nestled among low hills. This one is built more permanently, wooden beams, stone hearth. Even a little pen for chickens who look entirely too comfortable considering their likely fate. But what catches your eye is the structure next to the main tent. It's tall, dome-shaped and steaming. A kakur, a Mongol-style bathhouse. You blink. Again, that's 2 spa stops in under 500 miles. Either the Yam is really leaning into the wellness industry, or this leg of the route was built by someone who seriously needed to chill. You unsaddle and step inside. It's dim heated by stones that glow red in the center. Steam rises in waves. A pot of herbs simmers in the corner, releasing a pungent, nose-clearing scent that smells like mint smoke, and maybe something that once bit someone. 2 other riders sit on benches inside, wrapped in towels, eyes half closed. One of them gestures lazily at a stack of smooth stones. You toss one into the central pit and steam erupts like applause. You sit, and for the second time this week, you contemplate the strange kindness of Mongol infrastructure. See, the Yam wasn't just about speed, it was about sustainability. Riders needed to stay alive, yes, but also coherent, healthy, vaguely sane. The stations weren't luxury hotels, but they were designed for maximum efficiency hot food, dry shelter medical herbs, and the occasional hot spring or bathhouse when geography allowed. Not every route had spa stops, of course. Some had bandits, some had sandstorms. One station, they say, was built next to a salt flat that drove horses mad if they drank the water. That one was eventually moved, probably after several very salty incidents. You breathe deeply, letting the steam curl around your face. The bathhouse is quiet except for the occasional hiss of stone meeting water. Your muscles soften. Your thoughts scatter like dust in sunlight. Outside, the night thickens. A wind picks up, moaning through the valley like a restless ox. You towel off, dress, and step back into the chill. Your next horse is waiting fresh, eager, probably judging your wet hair. The road calls again. By midnight, you're riding under stars so bright they look like holes poked in a velvet curtain. The moon is a silver plate hanging low over the hills. The world feels ancient and new all at once. And then you see it. A flicker in the distance, orange rhythmic. A fire. You lay away. You slow your horse. Not a station fire, too erratic. Bandits. It's just to one. You inch closer, heartbeat tightening. You remember the dagger tucked in your boot, not much, but it's sharp. You nudge your horse into a quieter trot. As you crest a small rise, the scene reveals itself. Not bandits, a caravan, a large one. Silk banners, wagons, camels snoring loudly in a circle. A group of traders gathered around a fire, laughing too loud for people carrying that much jade. You relax, then stiffen again. Because if you can see them, so can less friendly eyes. You consider stopping, sharing warm stories. Maybe a spare dumpling, but protocol says Yam riders keep moving unless absolutely necessary. Your seal gives you authority, but not immunity. You tip your head in silent greeting as you pass. One of the traders raises a wineskin in salute. You nod back and disappear into the dark. Moments like these remind you the Yam wasn't isolated. It threaded through a living empire, brushing past merchants, soldiers, monks, spies, and adventurers. Each Urtu was a window into a different life, a different landscape, and sometimes a place to wash your socks. By dawn, you've reached the edge of a wide plain. It opens up like a yawning mouth fringed with dark forests and morning mist. Your next station is somewhere in that haze. You spur your horse onward, the scent of pine filling your nose. Your satchel bounces against your side. The message inside is still sealed, still secret, but you carry it like it's fire. You descend into the mist like a ghost on horseback, breath mingling with the fog as if your lungs have started whispering back to the land. Trees loom like quiet sentries, tall pines with limbs that creak under the weight of secrets. Your horse slows instinctively, careful with each step, as if it too can feel the hush of this place. There's a path beneath the mist, barely visible, like a faded scar through the grass. You follow it, trusting your mount and the thread of horse droppings leading the way. Glamorous, no. Effective, yes. Historians still argue whether this fog-shrouded northern route was used year-round or only in the warmer months. Some believe it was crucial for moving messages to Russia and beyond. Others think it was a backup trail, an auxiliary artery when the main route was blocked by snow. War or one of Genghis's less stable relatives staging another family coup. You hear it before you see it, chickens. Squawking sharp and unmistakably irritable. Then the station emerges low and wide, made of rough timber. It's surrounded by a makeshift fence that looks like it was built during lunch and regretted. Immediately afterward, you dismount, legs, stiff knees, protesting. A shaggy dog trots up, sniffs your boot, and decides you're neither threat nor snack. You're officially acknowledged. Inside the main tent, the station keeper is boiling something that smells faintly like ginger and absolutely like boiled. Hoof. He nods when you enter, doesn't stop stirring. There's no need for conversation. You show your seal, drop your satchel, and settle on a fur mat near the fire. He ladles something into a wooden bowl and hands it to you. You nod in thanks. It is indeed boiled hoof soup, and you're so hungry you consider licking the bowl afterward. One of the quirks of the YAM system was its brutal efficiency. Meals were ready before riders arrived, horses pre-saddled, paths constantly checked by rotating scouts. It wasn't just fast, it was anticipatory, like the entire empire was holding its breath, waiting for you to arrive so it could hand you a snack and a new set of reins. And occasionally the stations got creative. This one, let's call it Misty Pines, is famous for its saddle steamer. A contraption cobbled together from scrap iron and goat bladder that somehow uses leftover campfire heat to dry and soften leather saddles. Riders talk about it like a folk legend. You wander outside to see it and find a wiry old man cranking a bellows while muttering to himself. He grins when he sees you and proudly points at a saddle perched over the steaming pot. It looks like it's being slow cooked. You nod solemnly like you totally understand how this works. He beams and offers you a piece of smoked fish tied to a string. You eat it politely and try not to think about the string part. You're handed a new horse, a bay with a shaggy coat and a mood that suggests it's had better days. You mount anyway, tip your thanks, and ride out into the thinning fog. Hours pass in a daze of hooves, wine, and trees that seem to watch you as you pass. And then, as if the world flips a page, the forest ends. Suddenly, you're in open country again. Hills roll ahead like the folds of a blanket, dappled with herds of wild sheep and the occasional lone tent speckling the horizon. Smoke rises from distant fires curling upward in lazy spirals. You catch sight of something odd, a cluster of wooden poles topped with animal skulls. You slow down. These are markers not of the Yam, but of something older. Some say these are ovus, shamanistic waypoints left by steppe tribes long before the Mongols unified under Genghis. You pause long enough to circle the ovu 3 times as tradition dictates, then leave a small stone on the pile as an offering. You whisper something under your breath, unsure why. Maybe the fog got into your soul a little. This stretch of the Yam is more sparsely populated. Stations are farther apart. Riders often travel in pairs here, but you've been alone for most of the leg. The only company you have is the wind, the distant sound of hooves echoing from some parallel trail, and your own increasingly weird thoughts. Like, could a goat be trained to deliver messages? Or if I eat one more boiled hoof, will I turn into a horse? Or the ever-recurring, when was the last time I slept for more than a sneeze? You reach the next station just after sunset. It's built beside a river that glows gold in the last light. The station keeper, a woman with a shaved head and arms like tree trunks, inspects your seal and waves you toward a sleeping platform raised off the ground. You collapse onto it without even removing your boots. But then you hear it. Music. Soft, plucked. Maybe a 2-string Morin core. Or possibly just someone very enthusiastic with a bow and some twine. You sit up blinking into the dark and follow the sound. Behind the main tent, riders are gathered around a fire. One plays, another sings low, rhythmic, half chant, half lullaby. It's a song about horses or longing or possibly both. No one speaks. You sit down and let it wash over you. It occurs to you the Yam wasn't just about movement, it was about connection. A network that spread ideas, culture, jokes, gossip. At one station, a rider told you about a city you've never seen, where the buildings shine at night and people eat soup from silver bowls. At another, a boy recited a poem he'd heard from a monk just passing through. Even now, as you sit listening to a language you half understand, you feel the strands of empire weaving around you like threads in a giant galloping quilt. Eventually, someone hands you a bowl of hot rice with dried fruit and a generous scoop of something sweet. You raise an eyebrow. Station keeper chuckles and says, "Imperial Inspector came through last week. We had to impress." You grin, grateful for the leftovers of someone else's VIP visit. Sleep comes gently this time. The music lingers even as your eyes close like smoke that doesn't want to leave your coat. And in your dreams, the road is endless. The horses never tire. And the steam baths come with foot massages and complimentary dumplings. A man can hope. You wake up to the scent of frying yak butter and wood smoke curling into your nostrils. Your eyelids twitch open with the sluggishness of someone who dreamed too deeply and slept too. Well, for one terrifying second, you forget where you are, but then the creak of a saddle, the clop of hooves, dinars, and a rooster aggressively auditioning for sunrise duty all remind you you're still in the middle of the Mongol Empire and the road isn't going to right itself. Your boots are stiff when you put them on. Your knees protest. Your horse looks at you with the unimpressed stare of an overqualified employer. Still, you mount tip your chin to the station keeper and vanish into the dawn like a whisper wrapped in leather. The yam route starts to climb. At first, it's gradual little hills that roll like waves in a lazy sea. But then the land begins to buckle and rear, and soon you're threading through a narrow pass. Rocks looming on either side like frozen giants mid-argument. It's colder here. The wind cuts sideways through the ravine, finding every gap in your coat like it's been training specifically for this moment. You pull your hood tighter and focus on the rhythm of hooves and breath yours and the horses, syncing up like a drum beat. Then you see it an two perched on the edge of a cliff, tethered to the sky by nothing more than stubborn architecture and prayer flags. It looks like a misplaced temple, the kind of place where secrets are whispered into the bones of the mountain. This is a highland station rare and revered. Historians still argue whether these cliff-edge stops were part of the original Yam blueprint or improvised later as trade routes shifted. Some claim they were early warning posts against Chinese incursions. Others believe they were spiritual hubs, maintained by monks who doubled as couriers when inspiration or imperial command struck. You don't know which story is true, but you do know the tea here is absurdly good. The keeper is an old woman with a voice like gravel and a laugh that rattles windows. She gestures you inside, serves you something bubbling in a clay pot that tastes like fermented happiness, and tells you, completely deadpan, that the station is haunted by what you ask, trying not to burn your tongue. She shrugs, mostly bad decisions. You nod solemnly, relatable. After a short rest, you're pointed toward the back exit of the station, a path so narrow it could have been carved by accident. You're assured it's safe as long as your horse doesn't panic. Your horse, of course, immediately begins to consider its panic options. The trail hugs the cliff and every gust of wind feels like a personal attack. You lean forward in the saddle, whispering encouragements that sound a lot like bargaining. But the view is insanity in postcard form. Glacial lakes blink from the valleys below. Snow dusts the peaks like powdered sugar. And somewhere in the distance, you swear you hear throats singing, carried on the breeze. The Yam was not always about the fastest path, it was often about the only one. Mountain routes like this were treacherous but unavoidable, especially when messages had to cross into Tibet or south toward Yunnan. Riders like you had to be half courier, half goat. At one particularly steep turn, your horse slips, scrambles, recovers. Your heart jumps out of your body, does a full cartwheel, and slams back in. You both pause, breathing hard. You offer your horse a dried apricot out of sheer gratitude. It declines. Eventually, the path widens. You descend into a valley where the temperature swings up 10 degrees, and suddenly you're sweating. Through your cloak, birds chirp, bees buzz. You could swear you smell honey. And then, incredibly, you hear music again. This time it's drums, steady, hypnotic, full of ancient rhythm and bad decisions waiting to happen. You follow the sound and stumble into a seasonal market camp. Nestled beside a lake as smooth as polished glass, tents bloom like flowers across the shoreline. Traders, nomads, herders, and a handful of fellow yam riders move among makeshift stalls, haggling and gossiping with the unfiltered glee of people who haven't seen each other in months. You dismount. Instantly, a child appears and tries to sell you a marmot hat. You politely decline. They counteroffer with a marmot and a hat. You consider. You take a lap instead. It's here that you remember another quirk of the Yam, its double life as a news system. Riders didn't just carry imperial orders. They passed rumors, jokes, weather reports, military updates, and the occasional spicy letter that was definitely not officially sanctioned, but was absolutely read aloud in every station along the way. At one stall, a man recites a poem allegedly written by the Khan's nephew after he got rejected by a Persian princess. It involves a lot of dramatic metaphors about camels and shame. The crowd laughs until tea comes out someone's nose. You trade a spare pair of gloves for a pouch of dried mango and a laughably off-tuned flute carved from goat horn. You will never play it, but it feels right. As night falls, you camp among the others. The stars spill across the sky like dropped sugar. Fires crackle, someone juggles, someone else juggles worse. You sit with other riders and swap stories, the worst saddle sore. Anyone's had a three-way tie. The fastest leg ever ridden a guy who broke two horses in one rib. And the station that served fried grasshoppers so good, a general tried to have the keeper reassigned to the palace kitchen. One rider pulls out a scroll, cracks the seal, and reads an anonymous message addressed to no one, a love letter in Mongolian Persian, in terrible Chinese. Everyone howls. Someone suggests turning it into a song. It's probably already won. You sleep light but warm, curled beside your horse, who snores with all the dignity of a drunk uncle. When you wake, the market is already thinning. Traders heading south, herders moving east. You mount up and ease back onto the yam line, still visible in the faint ruts and trampled grass that stretch forward like a promise. You ride towards sunrise, and the message in your satchel still sits silent, unread. But not for long. The morning rides in slowly, dragging its golden feet across the valley floor as you and your horse trot onward, brushing dew from tall grass with every stride. Your breath fogs briefly in the crisp air before the sun burns it away. This stretch of the yam feels less like an official route and more like a trail whispered between hills and remembered by hooves alone. You're traveling light again, no market distractions, no clifftop distractions, and thankfully, no soup that smells like burnt antlers. Just you, the road, and a horse that appears to be humming, or maybe it's just chewing. Ahead lies a curious segment of the yam one rarely spoken of in grand historical records, but infamous in the hushed stories riders share in broken tents and midnight fires. This is the territory of the floating station's rest stops, situated along rivers and lakes, accessible only by raft barge or, if you're unlucky, an impromptu doggy paddle. Historians still argue whether these waterbound posts were strategically brilliant or just a logistical nightmare forced by geography. Some see them as testaments to Mongol innovation. Others claim they were built because someone's cousin owed the Khan a favor and owned a lot of boats. You reach the river near midday. It's wide and lazy with dragonflies skimming its surface and reeds swaying like sleepy dancers. A rickety wooden platform juts out from the bank. Waiting beside it is a man with a feather in his cap, a paddle in one hand and a roasted duck leg in the other. "Courier," he asks, not looking up from his meal. You nod. He points with the drumstick. "Boat leaves when I finish this." Fair enough. You sit, wait. Watch the ducks, real ones, bob and mutter on the current. The boatman finishes his duck, wipes his hands on his pants, and gestures grandly to a barge with a faded red sail and more rope than you know what to do with. You board. Your horse follows with all the grace of a drunk acrobat. The river carries you both eastward. It's slow but oddly luxurious. The Mongols weren't known for fancy boats, but some of these floating urtus went beyond practicality and bordered on indulgent. One famous example boasted a tent covered in velvet, where high-ranking messengers could sip tea while watching the water roll by. Yours has a canvas awning, a pair of questionable cushions, and something sticky on the floor that no one is addressing. Still, the rhythm of the water lulls you into a near trance. The barge rocks gently. Birds call from the trees. Somewhere in the reeds a fish jumps, startling your horse into what can only be described as an interpretive dance. You pass another boat going the opposite way, painted with swirling patterns and powered by three men who are very invested in a game of finger. Bones. They shout something at your boatman, who replies with a rude gesture and a laugh. Apparently, river rivalry is a thing. The floating station itself is built on stilts raised above the water, like a smug frog on a throne. A ramp leads to the platform, which creaks under the weight of your approach. The station keeper, a woman with an elaborate braid and a leather vest that could stop any arrow, greets you with a nod. She doesn't offer food or drink. Instead, she offers a bucket. You look at the bucket, then at her. then at your horse. She points upstream. Hot spring. You follow the river trail on foot for about 5 minutes before the air changes. Warmer, wetter. You round a bend, and there it is, steam rising from a cluster of stones like the earth is exhaling. You're not alone. A couple of other couriers are already half submerged. Their uniforms draped on rocks, their sighs of relief echoing softly. You hesitate. Then you undress just enough to preserve modesty, decency, and your dignity 2 out of 3. Really, and sink into the water. Oh yes. This is the best thing to ever happen to your spine. It turns out several YAM stations were located near natural springs. And while not officially designated spa stops, they became exactly that. Riders used them to soak sore muscles, heal minor injuries, and, according to one totally unverifiable tale, cure heartbreak. The springs varied, some sulfur-rich and stinky, others mineral clear and bubbly. This one smells faintly of copper and moss and feels like a warm hand pressing gently into your bones. A fellow rider tells you a tale between yawns. Says one spring farther west is guarded by a monk who charges entry with riddles. Another claims theirs was haunted by a camel ghost who just wanted one last bath. You decide not to investigate that one. You stay in until your fingers wrinkle and your worries float away. Refreshed and slightly pruned, you return to the station. The keeper hands you dried fish and fermented milk. Your body protests, but you eat it anyway, because nothing says ready to ride like sour dairy and chewy trout. You're assigned a sleek, dark-coated horse that clearly knows it's attractive. It snorts, tosses its mane, and trots in place while you mount like a living flex. Back on the trail, the landscape begins to shift again. Grasslands return wider than ever, stretching into infinity. You pass small nomadic camps, some flying banners, others tucked silently into hills like secrets. Children wave. Dogs bark. You wave back. The dogs also bark back. The Yam was never just one kind of road. It was a braided ribbon of earth-water trade gossip, bureaucracy, and occasionally riverside jacuzzis. It adapted to the land, and the land in turn seemed to lean into it, creating shelter where needed, springs where possible, and enough space for 100,000 hooves to blur into a single gallop. As you ride, the wind picks up behind you. Your coat flaps. Your horse senses the change, quickens its pace. You lean forward, gripping the saddle, letting the rhythm of the ride and the memory of hot water in your bones carry you onward. There's another station ahead, you know. There always is. But for now, you are alone on the trail. And the trail is enough. You don't see the storm until it's already sitting on top of you. One moment, you're riding under an open sky, listening to the wind hum through the grass. The next, that wind shifts, pitch goes sharp and sour. The horizon sours with clouds that roll in fast and low, like smoke looking for something to burn. Your horse snorts, ears pinned back. It smells the change, same as you. You urge it forward, trying to outrun the sky. Spoiler, you don't. The rain arrives sideways, each drop a tiny slap. The wind follows, throwing sand and grass and bits of your dignity into your eyes. You wrap your cloak tight, hunker low, and look for anything that isn't wet. A stand of trees, a boulder, a blessedly oversized marmot. Instead, what saves you is a yurt. Yes, a full yurt, round, white solid like a stubborn pearl dropped into the middle of the storm. You don't even knock. You just shove the flap aside, drag yourself and your horse into the vestibule, and exhale like someone returning from the dead. Inside, it's warm, dry, dimly lit by a single oil lamp that flickers with judgment. Rider, comes a voice from the shadows. You nod, cough, nod again. A hand emerges with a wool blanket and a bowl of thick, salty stew. You don't ask what's in it. You just inhale. This isn't a formal Yam station. It's what riders call a gray tent, an unofficial, off-the-books rest stop. Usually someone's cousin aunt or retired courier keeping a halfway post alive for the sake of hospitality or maybe boredom. They're part of what made the Yam work so well, not just the logistics, but the culture. The understanding that if you were carrying the Khan's message, doors should open, fires should be stoked, broth should be brewed. You shiver as the stew warms your chest. Your host, a wiry man with one eye and infinite opinions, offers you fermented mare's milk. You decline as politely as possible. He shrugs and drinks it himself, grinning like a man with no regrets and no taste buds. You ever seen the fire horses, he asks between gulps. You blink. The what? He leans in. Some riders say they see them during lightning storms. Horses made of fire galloping through the clouds, carrying messages for the sky gods. You squint, real ones, he shrugs. Historians still argue whether that's just a metaphor or early hallucinations from hypothermic. Couriers, he sips again. I say they're real and fast. Outside thunder growls across the steppe like a slow-waking dragon. Your host gestures to the corner where a bedroll waits. You nod your thanks, peel off your wet cloak, and collapse with the grace of a sack of potatoes. You sleep hard. By dawn, the storm has cleared. The world smells rinsed. Your horse shakes off droplets with theatrical disdain. You refill your satchel. Thank the host with a small coin, and a story currency isn't always gold here, and hit the trail again. The land flattens into a great open nothing that is somehow also everything. No trees, no hills, just endless grass and sky like you're riding across the roof of the world. You pass a pair of riders coming the other way, each wearing the silver medallion of a high priority. Dispatch, you nod, they nod. Nothing more is needed. You're part of the same current, even if you're flowing in opposite directions. Soon you reach another Urtu, but this one's different. Larger, busier. Flags flutter from poles. Extra stables, a guard posted by the gate. You've reached one of the elite staging hubs, the backbone of the Yam, where packages are sorted. Horses rotated and riders grilled harder than breakfast meat. A tall woman in armor checks your papers, looks you over, then gestures toward a corner of the compound where several other riders sit in a circle, sharpening knives and trading insults that sound almost affectionate. You join them. Someone offers you dried cheese. You accept. Immediately regret it. It tastes like disappointment dipped in chalk. Here's the thing about the Yam efficiency didn't just happen by accident. These central hubs were how it kept moving like clockwork. Couriers were trained. Horses were bred and rested and rotated. Messages were copied in triplicate in case one version fell off a cliff or into a river or into stomach of a goat. Yes, it happened, often. One scroll minder boasts he once intercepted a forged message pretending to be from the Khan. It requested 1,000 bolts of silk and 3 court musicians. He caught the lie because the Khan hated music. Said it made him feel feelings. The man grins. Can't have that. Another writer mentions he once delivered a satchel that buzzed. It contained a dozen angry bees and a note that simply read, "For the beekeeper general." The general was reportedly delighted. It's these strange bits that tie the Yam together, not just the grand sweeping infrastructure, but the sheer mess of it all. The humanity, the weird jokes, the whispered superstitions about demon wolves who steal horseshoes or spirit messengers that can't cross running water. You spend the night in a shared yurt with 4 other couriers, all snoring like a barbershop quartet of exhausted bears. The fire crackles. Someone rolls over in their sleep and mumbles a message they never got to deliver. You write down your route so far on a scrap of hide, not for official records, just for you. A map made of memories, the cliff path, the goat horn flute, the ghostly spa, the fire horses. In the morning, the station master hands you a new scroll marked with the red stamp of urgency. It's heavier than usual, the kind of message that has consequences if it arrives late. You tie it to your sash, check your new horse, a broad-chested roan with a white blaze, and ride out before the sun clears. The horizon. The grass flies past beneath you. The wind is at your back again. You are part of something ancient, messy, and massive. And somehow it's still just beginning. By now your legs don't ache, they hum. Your spine doesn't complain, it negotiates. And your saddle, it's molded to your shape, like a slightly judgmental chair that's grown tired of throwing you off. You're deep into the empire's core now, somewhere between present-day Mongolia and northern China, where the land stretches on like a painted scroll that never ends. It's smoother here both in geography and in politics. Fewer bandits, more checkpoints. Fewer wolves, more yurts with smoke curling peacefully from their tops. The Yam's presence is undeniable here. Roads are more defined. The Urtus are closer together, their paths almost paved with familiarity. You pass a traveling merchant whose ox cart is practically vibrating from the weight of silk, spices, and oddly enough, a full-size bronze statue of a man holding a duck. You don't ask. At your next stop, you hand over your urgent dispatch scroll. The station chief reads the seal and raises an eyebrow. This one's headed to Karakoram. Your heart skips. Karakorum. Hintindasur, the capital, the nerve center, the jeweled belly button of the Mongol Empire. It's where orders begin and end, where generals receive promotions, where punishments are weighed, and where sometimes a rider with enough dust in their teeth can glimpse the machinery behind the legend. You're given a guide for the final stretch, a local boy, barely 12, sharp-eyed and fast-talking, riding a pony so small it might actually be part goat. He chatters the whole way, throwing out facts with the confidence of someone who's probably wrong 40% of the time. That rock over there, Genghis Khan peed on it. Blessed now. You raise a brow. No, really, he grins. Animals won't go near it. He's not entirely wrong. Many regions have sacred stones and trees linked to Genghis's movements. Historians still argue whether these sites are genuinely tied to his passage or the result of centuries of legend stacking. Eventually, the plains begin to clutter with signs of civilization, wooden poles, carved stones, flags bearing family sigils. You pass through small towns that buzz with trade and gossip. And always the yam continues seamless, resilient, inevitable. Karakorum emerges on the horizon like a mirage, not tall like European castles or Chinese pagodas, but sprawling and strange. Temples of every faith, Buddhist, Taoist, Muslim, Christian, all sitting side by side, like rival siblings forced to share a dinner table. Domes and spires jostle against flat-roofed homes, and government offices made of heavy timbers and thick clay walls. There are palaces here, yes, but also forges, slaughterhouses, schools. It's not a city that tries to impress, it's a city that works. And central to that work is communication. Your guide peels off at the edge of town, waving dramatically as he disappears into an alley. You're left to navigate the final steps alone. You arrive at the central dispatch hall, a squat fortress of a building with wide doors and guards. In polished leather, a scribe takes your scroll with surprising gentleness, hands you a token in return, one that grants you access to rest food and, more importantly, the baths. Oh, the baths. They're nothing like the river hot spring experience. These are engineered, tiled, domed, steam-laced, and echoing with distant humming. You soak in warm water, perfumed with herbs, and scrubbed with something gritty that smells like citrus and camel. Another rider floats nearby, snoring softly. You remember the first station, the wind-lashed plains, the awkward exchanges, the unfamiliar taste of milk that had ambitions beyond fermentation. You've come a long way. Later, you walk the city in borrowed clothes while your uniform dries in the sun. Vendors call out in 10 languages. A man sells honey-dipped grasshoppers next to a woman hawking pearls. A monk asks if you found enlightenment, and when you shrug, he nods and hands you a boiled egg. You visit the Silver Tree, a mechanical fountain built by a captured Parisian goldsmith, designed to serve alcohol in streams from metal spouts. It's both awe-inspiring and hilariously inefficient. A drunken noble tries to explain its symbolism, slurs something about unity, then topples backward into a bush. You help him up. He thanks you by offering a roasted mouse on a stick. You pretend to accept. That night, you're given quarters in the messenger's barracks, simple, clean, and deeply quiet. You sit on your cot, polishing your boots and listening to a night wind that feels oddly ceremonial. This is where many journeys end, and yet you're already wondering what comes next. One of the senior couriers, an older man, with a limp and a silver yam seal sewn into his sleeve, sits beside you. You know what they say, he asks. You raise a brow. No one rides the yam twice the same way. You nod. You get it now. It's more than a road. It's a mirror of the empire, of the people, of yourself. You lie back, eyes drifting closed. The sounds of Karakorum fade beneath the thrum of your own heartbeat. In the morning, you'll likely be sent back out northwest-east again. Who knows? But tonight, the road sleeps, and so do you, until you're needed again. The road back doesn't feel the same. Maybe it's the weight of that scroll you delivered, or the quiet knowledge that Karakorum's pulse beats under your feet. Maybe it's the realization that this network you ride through isn't just a system, but a living, breathing organism with 1,000 hearts and lungs and veins. Your horse snorts impatiently, eager to move, and you oblige, feeling the saddle settle beneath you like an old friend. The wind has shifted again, soft, carrying the scent of pine and dust, of distant fires and freshly cut wood. As you retrace your steps, you pass through familiar stations. Each one greets you with subtle differences, a new face here, a different stew there, a whispered story about the last courier who passed through. You realize the yam is constantly changing, like the steppe itself, fluid, unpredictable, resilient. One station keeper shares a peculiar tale about a messenger who once outran a snow leopard by singing an ancient tune that supposedly confused the beast. Historians still argue whether the story is fact or folklore, but the melody has stuck in your head like a catchy pop song you can't shake. You cross a vast salt flat shimmering under the midday sun. The ground sparkles with crystals that crunch beneath your horse's hooves. Here, the yam feels less like a road and more like a ribbon of possibility stretched across the earth's back. Near the edge of the flat lies a small cluster of yurts where a curious tradition takes place. Riders gather to share spa recipes, mixtures of herbs, mud, and mineral waters that promise everything from faster recovery to better dreams. Some swear by the recipe handed down from a Mongol queen. Others insist the best cure is simply laughter and hot tea. You listen fascinated and try a cup of the strongest brew, which tastes like it was brewed by someone who hates sugar and joy. You pretend to love it because that's how riders survive the road with humor, stubbornness, and enough caffeine to fuel a small army. Rikishur. Further on, you encounter a crossing guarded by a pair of grizzled men who ask for your papers and a small story. They're collectors of tales, believe it or not, keepers of the yam's oral history. You share a quick anecdote about the floating stations and their spa stops, and they nod thoughtfully. Every story is a thread, one says. Together they weave the fabric of this empire. You feel the truth of that in your bones. As night falls, you find a quiet spot beneath a blanket of stars that feels as old as time itself. The Milky Way stretches overhead, a river of light flowing through the darkness. You think of the couriers who rode before you and those who will ride after, all connected by this invisible thread of communication and trust. You drift asleep, the sound of distant horses and whispered winds carrying you deeper into dreams. The final leg of your journey feels like riding through a dream that's just started to blur at the edges. You're no longer the wide-eyed newcomer struggling to keep pace. Instead, you glide along the trail with practiced ease, your horse's hooves thudding a steady rhythm that matches your heartbeat. The landscape around you seems familiar, yet ever-changing, the rolling steps giving way to gentle hills dotted with wildflowers, their colors muted in the golden light of late afternoon. At one of the smaller Ur-2 stations, you pause to rest. Here an old woman tends a small garden of medicinal herbs. She smiles when you ask for water and offers a cup steeped with a blend of local flowers and roots. The aroma is soothing like a lullaby in a cup, and you sip slowly, feeling the warmth spread through your chest. She tells you about the station's unofficial spa, a natural hot spring hidden just beyond a grove of birch trees. It's not marked on any official maps, but riders speak of it in hushed tones, calling it a sanctuary where aching muscles are soothed and weary souls find brief respite. The yam wasn't just about speed, it was also about survival, about knowing when to push forward and when to pause. You decide to seek out this hidden oasis. The path is narrow and winding, lined with whispering leaves and dappled sunlight. When you arrive, steam rises gently from the water's surface, carrying with it the earthy scent of mineral-rich mud and wildflowers. You step in cautiously, the warm water enveloping you like a comforting embrace. Around you, other riders soak silently, their faces relaxed, eyes closed. The world slows. The hum of the empire fades to a distant murmur. Someone nearby hums a tune, old, haunting, and strangely familiar. You hum along the melody, weaving through the air like a thread connecting past and present. Later, wrapped in a soft blanket, you listen as stories unfold around the fire. Tales of riders who braved blizzards and bandits, who delivered messages that changed the course of history, who found moments of peace in the most unlikely places. Historians still debate how much these spa stops influenced the yam's success. Some say they were vital, offering physical recovery and boosting morale. Others argue they were mere folklore romanticized by tired couriers craving comfort. You think it doesn't matter. The stories themselves are part of the system's heartbeat. As night deepens, you lay back, eyes tracing the stars once more. The empire's vastness feels both overwhelming and intimate. Every message carried, every mile ridden, Every brief pause in a warm spring knits together a tapestry of connection and endurance. You close your eyes, the soft chorus of the steps singing you toward rest. You wake before dawn, the chill of night still clinging to the air, mingling with the gentle warmth of the bathhouse memories. Outside, the step is quiet, the kind of quiet that presses gently against your ears, inviting you to listen to the soft rustle of grass, the distant call of a night bird reluctant to give up its vigil. Your pack is lighter now, not just from discarded gear, but from the weight of stories collected along the way. You realize the yam is less a road and more a living pulse, a rhythm that beats through the bones of the empire, carrying not just messages, but the hopes, fears, and lives of countless riders before you. As you mount your horse for the last stretch, the wind picks up again, tousling your hair and tugging at your cloak. The scent of wild herbs drifts on the breeze, reminding you of that hidden spa, the warmth of the water, the quiet camaraderie of those brief rests. These pauses were the unexpected soul of the yam, the secret ingredient that transformed it from a mere postal system into a legend. Ahead lies the final destination of this particular journey. The sun climbs, casting long shadows that dance with the dust kicked up by your horse's hooves. Each step feels heavier with meaning. You carry more than scrolls. Now you carry the legacy of an empire that stretched across continents, held together by trust, endurance, and an unbreakable chain of riders. You cross one last marker, a carved stone etched with symbols of the Mongol Empire, a silent witness to centuries of messages carried through sunstorm and snow. Historians still debate how the yam influenced global history, whether its speed and efficiency opened doors for cultural exchange or merely tightened the grip of conquest. But you know from the marrow of your bones that it was something far more human, a network woven with sweat, kindness, strange spa stops, and stories shared under starry skies. You slow your horse gaze, stretching over the endless horizon, feeling the empire's vastness and intimacy at once. The road behind you hums softly, alive and waiting. You breathe in deep. The journey may end here, but your story rides on. The journey is winding down now, and as you settle into the quiet space between wakefulness and sleep, let your thoughts drift gently like the soft steppe breeze. Imagine the endless horizon stretching before you, vast, mysterious, and patient, while the warmth of the spa waters lingers on your skin. A soothing reminder that even in the harshest conditions, moments of comfort and connection are possible. The yam system was more than a network of roads and horses. It was a lifeline that wove together diverse cultures, languages, and stories across continents. Each messenger carried not just messages, but pieces of humanity: hope, fear, orders, laughter, and sometimes a fleeting touch of kindness at a remote spa stop that felt like a small miracle. As your breathing slows and your eyelids grow heavier, picture the riders before you, under endless skies, sharing tales by firelight, their voices mingling with the soft night sounds. Picture the hidden baths and the strange humming silver tree fountain, the wildflower-scented air, the taste of bitter herbal tea that somehow feels like home. This vast empire's heartbeat is in these small moments, in the resilience of riders and horses, in the trust that kept a sprawling world connected. The road continues beyond your dreams, endless and inviting. Now let your body sink deeper into rest, carried gently by the whispering winds and the fading stars. Tomorrow is another day, another ride. But for now, breathe in peace, breathe out the day. Sleep well, traveler.